Hello, good evening. Thank you for joining us. It is The Late Show, and it is live. It's Wednesday night, and my dear wife Leslie is going to be with me just to take your emails and your SMS texts because we want to interact with you tonight particularly. And Leslie, do you want to say just a quick hello?
Well, I could if you like. Actually, I just want to say that Howard has been prepping this programme for all of today. I haven't had anything to do with it. I don't really know what the programme's about. I've had so much going on within my own workload. So I'm just here to comment where I can and to read out your emails and texts. So please do keep them coming in.
So ignorance is bliss, is that what you're saying?
It is indeed,
okay.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so
yes.
it's all down to me to try and make it work tonight.
That's it. Yes.
Well, I've been trying to find things that I think that people, especially our viewers at Revelation, they need to know what's going on in certain circles, particularly when we're looking at the situation in the Middle East between Hamas and Israel. I say Hamas purposely rather than the Palestinians in Israel, because I've got an interview that I did, handled that probably back in 1999, when Jew and Arab, where I met from both camps, as it were, and they got on really well together. And in fact, some of the acknowledgements that one of the Arabian lady, I think it's quite, I don't know, quite revealing that might be a bit of a shock to some people, but on the other hand, it'll be reassuring because they dwell together in harmony and peace. And it's just the likes of Hamas and Hezbollah, and obviously the proxies, which they are of Iran, and also the Houthis and other people that have been actually dragged into this Middle East confrontation, which really basically has been going on for nearly 4,000 years. Abraham and his dear wife Sarah, there was a lady that got in the way a little bit. Do you remember her name? What was her name?
I'm going to remember in a minute.
Oh, see, sorry, I thought you were taking part there. But Ishmael came from the loins of Abraham, but there was a little help from Sarah's handmaid.
A servant, that's right.
That's right. And really, basically, ever since that time, because Sarah was trying to preempt a promise that she was going to have a child from her own loins, and Abraham's as well. And you know, the angel of the Lord appeared to Sarah and Abraham, and Abraham on their way to Sodom and Gomorrah, because the angel of the Lord come down to see for himself, as it were, what was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah, because of the things that really were very much against God's laws, which were being carried out there at that time. And anyway, long story short, obviously, you know, the offspring that was produced by the slave girl Hagar, okay, was not God's plan, but the offshoot of that was it produced the Arab, what we would say is the Arab nations.
Abraham got a bit ahead of himself, really, didn't he?
Well, it wasn't Abraham, it was Sarah, really. That's a good, I'm sticking up for the males here.
He had to agree. I mean, it was almost like working out for themselves.
Yes, but I mean,
they would have a child.
I know, but the thing is, he should have actually probably said, no, thank you, but I'm
trusting in God. Yeah.
But it was the female. This is going to be a male-female thing.
She was the one that gave permission, and she was the one that encouraged.
To take Hagar,
yes,
and to produce a child.
Yeah.
Okay, but that was not God's plan, because all she had to do was just wait and be a little patient. But she was 100 years of age, which was well past the childbearing age of even in those days. But anyway, all that to say that really, basically, this is a family feud between Jew and Arab, and one day God is promised that that's going to be reconciled. But going back to the promise in Genesis chapter 12, where it's a statement more than a promise, where God says that God would bless those who blessed Abraham, Isaac and Jacob, because that was the lineage which God approved of, rather than through Hagar and Ishmael. Although they would be blessed and they would become mighty nations, which they have done, but over the centuries, but the actual promise for the promised land and the things which God wanted to do and use the people that came from Isaac and Jacob. And that was where we have Israel today. Okay, so a long story short, but what I wanted to do is start with, this was Gilad Erdnan, who is the Israeli ambassador to United Nations, and he was speaking at one of the assembly sessions, and it's quite, I think, quite revealing, and it's very well put together. Just bear with us. We're going to put these into small bite-sized chunks. This is the way I like doing things these days. It gives you an opportunity to email in live@revelationtv.com and the SMS number, which will come up on your screen. So what I'm going to do is start with segment 1, where Gilad is actually addressing the UN Assembly, and he doesn't pull any punches throughout the whole of this. And then after we've done all of these, we'll be looking at the Arab and Jew living together in harmony, and then also a Muslim lady that got to speak to who is called Christian Prince, and what she asked as a Muslim to Christian Prince, who's a former Muslim himself, but knows the Quran and the Hadith inside out. It's very revealing, and I think it is quite encouraging as well to know that so many of the, if you like, Muslim communities are actually coming to a real knowledge of who Jesus Christ is and appreciating who he is and what he stands for. But meanwhile, let's start with Gilad, and the first segment, please, of the Israeli ambassador to the UN.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yesterday, the Jewish people marked the end of Passover. Passover is the holiday in which we celebrate our first step to nationhood, the exodus from slavery in Egypt and the beginning of our ancestors' journey to the land of Israel. The Jewish people set out for the Promised Land 3,500 years ago. On Passover, Jewish people around the globe gathered together at the Seder, our special holiday meal, to tell the story of our liberation. We remind ourselves of the suffering we endured, the generations-long hardships we survived on the road to salvation. We remember this pain by eating what we call matzah, the bread of affliction, and maror, the bitter herbs. And we dip our food in salt water. Why? To commemorate our tears. Yet, this year, we did not need bitter herbs and salt water to remember the pain. Because this year, every Jewish family had an empty hole, a hole in their hearts. This year, every Jew focused on the atrocities of October 7th and the suffering of the Israeli hostages held in Hamas terror tunnels. We couldn't really celebrate our ancestors' liberation while our brothers and sisters are still waiting to be freed from the Hamas monsters. Yet, as my people marked this Passover with grief, the UN is again seeking to reward the perpetrators of the horrors. The UN couldn't care less about Israel. To hell with our safety, to hell with our future, and to hell with our hostages. The General Assembly is fueled by nothing other than political interests. Not by the UN Charter, not by morality. And nothing exemplifies the UN's rotten values more than the advancement of a Palestinian statehood. No, nothing can reward and incentivize the terrorists that committed the October 7th massacre more than this discussion here today. To this day, you have not even condemned Hamas, not even once. To this day, not a single UN initiative has been taken for the sake of the hostages, the Israeli hostages. Yet instead, this body has focused only on recognizing a Palestinian terror state, unilaterally. an entity fueled by Jewish genocide, by terror, by Nazi-like incitement. You know, by advancing a Palestinian state, you are telling the child-murdering Hamas rapists that terror pays off. You have done nothing for the victims, but have mobilized for the murderers. It makes me want to vomit. Yes, vomit. You know that the Palestinian Authority doesn't meet the criteria for statehood. No Palestinian leader, not a single one of them, has even condemned Hamas or their massacre. You prefer another rogue state, and to hell with the Jewish state. The Palestinian Authority is paying salaries, think of it, paying salaries to the very terrorists that invaded Israel and murdered 1,200 innocent Israelis. This is who you want to grant statehood to? Granting full UN membership to the Palestinians will only have two destructive results. Number one, it will further incentivize terror, as I explained, and number two, it is a clear message to the Palestinians that they never ever have to sit at the negotiating table, let alone to make any compromises. Everyone who understands something about negotiations can understand what I just said. The Palestinians have rejected in the past every peace plan ever made, and they continue to support terror and boycott any negotiations. And now they know that their rejectionism pays off. Look at this discussion. These UN sessions will be remembered in the future as one of the primary obstacles to resolving the conflict. Remember my words. The UN today is the main impediment to peace. You, most of you, you that supports a forced unilateral establishment of a terror state, a Palestinian terror state, is an obstacle to peace. You are the dream come true for every Palestinian terrorist that seeks to destroy Israel through diplomatic terror. Because without your support, the Palestinians would have had to internalize that negotiations and mutual compromises are the only way forward. That's how you make peace. You should be ashamed of yourselves, those who support a unilateral, forced Palestinian terror state.
Okay. You know, as I say, we're inviting you because we want to hear from you what your thoughts are. As the ambassador there was saying, that there's been no real condemnation by Hamas's murderous and wicked acts on October the 7th against 1,200 innocent Israelis that lost their lives. And obviously then there's all the prisoners as well that have been taken. And the Palestinians have rejected, just to remind you, every peace treaty that's ever come up. But when you look at probably why the reasons they have done this, you can see very clearly that the Hamas Charter, which goes back into the 30s, or the founding members of that, which were very clearly saying that really we don't want a solution other than the getting rid of the Jews, and particularly the nation of Israel. So it is from the river to the sea, and we're going to see and hear more about that as well. Want to hear from you. So what questions would you have? Are we going to see more of what the United Nations actually did or didn't do, or have totally ignored, when you compare it to other things that are happening in the world outside of Israel and Hamas and what's going on there? And I think you will, the actual way in which the ambassador has actually put it to the UN, he's actually said pretty much, you've just really picked on Israel. Now, I know many people will be saying, well, do you know, Israel's gone over the top in response, but nevertheless, let's have a look at the whole picture as well. And our hearts do go out to the Palestinians that are suffering, because you'll see and hear probably from other people as well. And I've got tomorrow night as well, where I might be able to add some other information, especially via video, will show you how the Palestinian people are being used by Hamas. And some of the people, the Palestinians, are extremely innocent and don't want anything to do with Hamas, but they're stuck in the middle, whether they like it or not.
OK, let's say good evening to some of you. Lovely to see you both, Howard and Leslie, tonight, says Valerie. Thank you, Valerie. I'm going to Muslims would not have existed, and the trouble that many Muslims have caused would never have happened.
Yes. But I think what we've seen at that time, I mean, Muhammad didn't come into existence till about 700 AD, right? Mm-hmm. So you had probably 3,000 years without the term or the instigation or the beginning of the Muslim faith, okay? But when you, I could get into it a little bit more, I'm going to leave this alone till a little bit later, but when you look at the hadith, which I've been doing quite a lot this last few days, it's absolutely riddled with stupidity. I'm sorry to have to tell you that, but it's actually got some strange things which Muhammad actually came up with himself, and they call him Prophet Muhammad, and you can see from one of the videos that we're going to show this evening that he's anything but a prophet. In fact, he made lots of mistakes about the things he was prophesying, and usually the things that he prophesied had already happened, you know. So we'll get that point later on when we look at some of the YouTube videos. But anyway, is there any other emails? OK,
so I've got one here from Tony in Cornwall. Good evening. He says, so lovely to see Leslie and Howard. Can I first say how well you're looking? Oh, I don't think I'm looking well at all.
Probably talking about me. I've got a bit of a tan. I don't know about you, Les.
See Revelation. I'd love to see Revelation TV do a UK road show. Why do the Jews not believe in Jesus when it says in the Old Testament, he will be born of a virgin and you will call him Emmanuel? Thank you both for all the hard work you do.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that many have now come to faith, Jewish people, and particularly in Israel. They're called Messianic Jews. If you like, the Jewish people who are either secular or are religious do not like the term Messianic Jew. They think it's a little bit of a, a slap in the face to Judaism. But really, it's a good point. If they were able to examine, and I'll give you a very quick example. What about Barry Siegel's wife, Batia?
Yes.
Who her job was to do a lot of typesetting. And when she actually came to Israel from one of the other states in, I think it was in Sudan or somewhere like that,
right.
She travelled up to Israel with her mum and dad, I think, and became part of the nation there of Israel. But she did this typesetting, and somebody had given her the New Testament to typeset into the Hebrew language from the King James or something like that. Yeah. And she realised, she said, hang on a sec, this is a very Jewish book. Yeah. Well, of course, all the disciples at that time were all Jews, and some of them, like the Apostle Paul, were very learned men who had been through the highest degree, if you like, of Judaism. And he himself, as he was called Saul in those days, actually was persecuting the Jews. And it wasn't till after Jesus had actually, had been put to death by the Jews and those that were in opposition to him, that on the road to Damascus, Paul had, or Saul as it was, had a visitation, and Jesus appeared to him in a blinding light, and Saul actually said, reassuring that some now are actually, of the Muslims, are coming to know Christ, either through a visitation, very much like a Damascus Road experience, like I've just explained, or through understanding the difference between what is in the Quran, what is in the Hadith, and what is in the New Testament scriptures in particular.
OK, I've got lots of emails coming in. I've got one here from Pauline that says, hi, Howard and Leslie, what response did the ambassador receive after his speech? Haven't you got more parts of that speech?
Yeah.
To show.
Sorry, somebody was talking to me in my ear.
Yeah, so Pauline says, what response...
You've got it turned upside down, that's what you were saying.
I haven't.
No, do me a favour, just turn it, darling. turn it around. There you go. It's got the R the right way around.
I thought you thought I was reading it the wrong way around.
That'd be very clever, darling. Yeah.
What response did the ambassador receive after his speech, says Pauline?
Well, you'll get there, then you will
Yeah,
see.
we'll carry
But
on.
Look at this.
Yes. Do you want to go to another section, because I've got lots of emails?
Yes, sure. Okay, let's go to segment 2 and carry on with what the ambassador was actually saying to the UN Assembly.
Colleagues, during the Holocaust, there were the Nazis, there were collaborators, and there were those who turned a blind eye to genocide. All of them, all were guilty. And today there are modern-day Hitlers, such as Yahya Sinwar and Ayatollah Khamenei. There are Nazi terrorists like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Revolutionary Guard in Iran. And there are collaborators and those who turn a blind eye, just like the UN and its agencies today, such as UNRWA, OCHA, UN Women, just like, sadly, so many here in the General Assembly. This body reeks of anti-Semitism. It's everywhere. The UN cares nothing for Israeli blood. Nothing. Zero. It is a collaborator with the Nazis of our day, working to ensure Hamas's survival and even reward them for murder and rape. I have no words. The Palestinians have rejected, I'll say it again, every peace plan. They rejected every peace plan because to them the existence of a Jewish state is unacceptable. This is not about land. And if you need more proof, well, take a drive to Columbia University or to New York University. Listen to the murderous cries of the pro-Palestinian mobs. Look at their violence. Hear their calls for the genocide of Jews and Israelis. From the river to the sea, these mobs across the United States and Europe, they expose the truth. They have removed the mask of the Palestinian authorities' lies. The anti-Semites failed to annihilate us during the Holocaust. They failed in 1948, in 1967, and in 1973. But today, they are attempting again. This time not only through terror and war, like we've seen on October 7th, but also through UN weaponization and the exploitation of UN bodies. That's how they want to achieve their goal. And here is what they scream, and I quote, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." So for those of you that automatically vote against Israel with no understanding, I'll explain. They want a Palestine that stretches from the Jordan River, Israel's eastern border, to the Mediterranean Sea, Israel's western border. A free Palestine means that Israel doesn't exist. That's what they mean. And they have another chant. We don't want no two-state, we just want 48. I'll remind you what they mean. They want to return to the situation before Israel's War of Independence in 1948, after they rejected the partition plan that was accepted here in 1947. They want to erase Israel.
Interesting, isn't it, that they bring up this 48, which is when they want to go back, the Palestinians want to go back to pre-1948. But really, if you were to go back, you may as well go back a few thousand years, and quite often over the last, 5 months or 6 months, we've actually shown much of the history in the geographical sense and also in the promises that God made to the Jews, particularly for the state of Israel to be in existence, because it was there, 3,500 years ago. You've got the Jewish temple, which is where God actually had it built under strict instructions given to the Jewish people, and the stonemasons and things like that. I mean, it's an incredible piece of architecture, and that was finished around about 1000 BC. And it was Solomon's temple, and then it was obviously destroyed by the Babylonians in 6 or 7 BCE or thereabouts. And then you've also got it rebuilt by Herod, just the turn before it turned into the 4 BCE actually was when it was finished. And it didn't last long before 70 AD, and it was destroyed again. But this was on Mount Zion, so let's understand the term Zion is a place as well, and it's not just a
mad Zionists.
Yes, there's Zionists. You know, God is a lover of Zion. He placed on Mount Moriah, which is ironically where Abraham offered up his son Isaac. And, you know, these are no coincidences. But let's have a listen to what people are saying.
Strong words coming in regarding the UN, I can tell you. Someone says, I don't know if the UK is a member of the UN, but if we are, then our government should disown them.
Yeah.
The UK is a member of the UN, I'm sure. Dear Howard, people frequently talk about Abraham fathering Ishmael by Hagar. After Sarah died, Abraham took Keturah as his third consort, as described in Genesis chapter 25, and fathered several other descendants. These are historically significant family lines with extensive intermingling. We need to take note of the implications for today, says Andrew.
Yeah. Well, you sparked something there. The genealogies which are in the Bible, and I remember when I read it from beginning to end, I've said it a million times, so forgive me for saying it again, but I came across these genealogies, which are family records. So-and-so begat so-and-so, begat so-and-so, begat so-and-so, but it's a family tree. And you can, there are, I think, every 14...
begats.
Yeah, no, 1400 years. It seems that there's a whole genealogy that connect.
Right.
And you've got the genealogies that go back which are mentioned in Luke, and the other one is in Matthew, and they both go back to the descendants of David. And you've got, Mary, who's also descendant of David. They all came from that particular place, which is why they had to go back to Bethlehem to register at the time of Jesus's birth, you know, because they were descendants. But again, the genealogies were a very, very important part of keeping records of who was who, and then you can actually prove, as that lady wrote in and said, you know, that we can see who our ancestors really are, and they are Jews.
OK, this is from Mark in the Republic of Ireland. Says both Spain and Ireland are to recognise Palestinian as a state on the 21st of May. Shame on them, says Mark. I support Israel, as many Irish people do. Most, including United Nations, have forgotten what happened on October the 7th, and that 80% of the so-called Palestinians support Hamas. Shalom. Thanks very much for that.
Yes, well, we can see this is all lining up for the prophecy to be fulfilled in Zechariah chapters 12 through 14, where all the nations come against Israel, and even those who have been friends of Israel for a long time, i.e. America and no doubt the United Kingdom, will all get tired of Israel and come against her, and that will be to our detriment.
OK, so good evening to you, Glenda from West Yorkshire. Hi, Howard and Leslie. There are some Christians who believe that Israel is, as you mentioned, going over the top, and they don't seem to want to know the truth of what is going on. It is so concerning and really sad. Thank you for speaking the truth. God bless you. The ambassador is absolutely correct, says Jeremy in South Wales. The shameful UN has decided to reward evil and has turned its face against good. I've only been able to conclude that the United Nations is a satanic organisation that is working to destroy the apple of the Lord's eye. They shall not succeed.
That's a very
strong
good
emails
point.
coming in.
That's really good. You're spot on there.
Yeah. Blessings to you, Howard and Leslie, from Pauline in Ireland. Thank God for that ambassador's speech. The UN are a farce and total disgrace that should be done away with. Evil is good and good is evil in this world from so many angles. Jesus will return soon. Maranatha. Dave says that was some speech. You said that some people would think Israel has gone over the top. No, with what they have put up with over the years, they have every right. Did anyone from Israel complain when we bombed the Merna and Ida dams in Germany? No, our government should be supporting them. Thanks very much, Dave.
Yeah. OK, let's move on because I want quite a lot to get through here. Segment 3 of Gilad Erdan's speech to the UN Assembly.
Chants of the pro-Palestinian rioters on campuses are calls for Israel's destruction. We always knew that Hamas hides in schools. We just didn't realize that it's not only schools in Gaza. It's also Harvard, Columbia, and many elite universities. This is what we hear at academic institutions across the world, and they directly represent the Palestinians' goal. The only solution for them is a single Palestinian state that is Judenrein, Jew-free, from the river to the sea, achieved through repeated October 7th against Israel and also against Jews. And you here are collaborating with them and encouraging their racism and anti-Semitism. Just as Germany was the world capital of science and culture, yet it was there that Nazism was born and spread. History is now repeating itself. Elite universities, supposed bastions of liberalism and academia, have now become the breeding grounds for the most heinous racism and bigotry. Those that carry on the Nazis' race theory today are restoring to violence, shattering windows, attacking Jewish students, and calling for their removal from campus. The images that have come out of Columbia University are reminiscent of Kristallnacht. Just yesterday, over 100 violent pro-Palestine Nazi agitators were arrested at Columbia University. Swift and severe action must be taken against faculty that back this mayhem. University presidents and professors today must be held accountable for permitting this. Students who call for the murder of their peers or use physical violence must be arrested and expelled. But this brainwashing did not happen overnight. It was the result of years of incitement and delegitimization here at the UN. And do you know who it is that set the stage for this blatant anti-Semitism? The UN, the General Assembly. The anti-Israel vitriol spread here by this organization is what sparked what we are seeing today on college campuses. By falsely condemning Israel and marking the Jewish state as the foundation of all evil, you are emboldening anti-Semites and terrorists alike. It is because of you that these mobs think that attacking Jews is acceptable, that calling for the deaths of Israelis is tolerable. Universities are permitting this Nazi-like behavior because for decades, the UN's anti-Israel stance has been justified by this very body, the General Assembly. Look at the damage you have caused. Look at the generations you have indoctrinated. This is the final moment for the UN, I'm telling you, to show that it remembers the reason it was established in the wake of the Holocaust, to prevent atrocities against Jews. Wake up! I call on the Secretary General and on leaders around the globe to stop hiding behind empty words. There is no freedom to incite murder and violence, and there is no liberty to attack Jewish students. Whoever does not stand against the abhorrent anti-Semitism is a collaborator. But just as it says in the Bible regarding the Egyptians' treatment of the Israelites, וכאשר יענו אותו, כן ירבה וכן יפרוץ. But the more they were oppressed, the Israelites, the more they increased and spread. Remember these words from the Bible. The UN chooses to continue singling out the Jewish people, but we will only grow more resilient and thrive. Colleagues, today marks the ninth General Assembly meeting held on Gaza since Hamas's massacre. Ninth. Not one of the meetings focused on condemning Hamas or releasing the hostages. Not even one. I'm disgusted by this institution.
Just to remind our viewers, we are watching from the United Nations. It's not live, it was done just recently. And also we want to give thanks to JTV. This is a young man, a young Jewish boy.
Let me just read this actually.
Well. Oh, right.
Can I do that? It's from Cynthia in Devon, who says that JTV is run by a young Jewish man from London. She said it's really good. You might want to check it out. So maybe she didn't realise that we were actually taking those clips from JTV. She says maybe you might want to interview this brave young Jew.
Yes.
I think I'll forward that to myself and see if I could. You never know.
Well done,
might be able to get it. There you go. Done. Right.
Go on.
Next one. Yeah. Hi guys, that was an amazing speech by the ambassador. That was plain speaking as what we get from Douglas Murray, a staunch supporter of Israel. Brilliant quote from him. When you're putting out a fire, you don't stop halfway, you finish the job. Praying for his salvation, Shalom, says Dory. Okay. Next one. Dear both, humble is the direction that we need to go. Bow down to him to all things. The UN ambassador for Israel was 100% correct in his assessment of the situation with Gaza, and Ireland and Spain should be ashamed, says someone. Howard, I watched a narrated DVD of Matthew's Gospel yesterday, and there were indeed 14 generations 3 times over in the genealogy from Abraham to Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Quite ironic, yeah.
On my visit to Israel, I stood in a synagogue in Capernaum next to Peter's house, and I believe Jesus would have reached there. Okay.
Oh, definitely, yeah. That's a later version of that synagogue, but the earlier one, which would have been in Pergamum as well, Capernaum, sorry, would have actually been a spot for Jesus to actually preach in.
No one will fight Israel and win. They are wasting their time. They are just repeating the failures to destroy Israel. They cannot succeed, says Sadie.
Well, that's what Gilad was saying there, just in that last piece, that for generations, for thousands of years, the people who've hated Israel, for whatever reason, come against the nation of Israel, but also the Jewish people, program after program over the generations as well. They will not succeed. You know why? Because it says in Romans 11, God has a plan. He has not rejected his people, Israel. It is an eye-opener, chapter 11. You've got to read it yourself. And if I get a chance, I'll read some more from it. Over to you, Liz.
Good evening. Lovely to see you both, says Jean. She says, at last, the truth. The ambassador is stating the truth. It may be hard-hitting, and many don't want to hear it, but it is the truth. Thank you, Revelation TV. God is using you greatly for the times we are entering into. And do you know how this afternoon I wrote the inside page for the June Our Times? Obviously, we have to always work in advance. And I can't remember exactly what I said, but I just said, you know, to thank you to our financial supporters who are standing with us so that we can shout from the rooftops of God's heart for Israel, the truth behind what's going on, the, you know, just bringing everything to bear when so many people in this world, including so many Christians, just seem to be totally opposed to the Jews. Yeah. And they just don't understand.
If they knew their Bible, if they'd read the scriptures, you cannot help but understand the real and full history of Israel and the importance it is not only to God, but also to us as Gentiles. And even if you're a Muslim or whatever religion you're of, you need to look at chapter 11 of Romans. When I first read that, it was an eye-opener, because in my rendition of the Bible at that time, probably 40, 50 years ago, it said, this is a sacred secret. And that got my attention. What is a sacred secret? And I read the whole of Romans 11. God did not reject his people, but God has made them, their eyes, as it were, so they can't see the truth of the whole situation with regards to their Messiah being Jesus of Nazareth. But one day their veil will be lifted and they will see it. But meanwhile, whilst they're veiled, we as Gentiles and unbelievers or non-Jews can actually come to know the Jewish Messiah in Yeshua, Jesus Christ of Nazareth. And then all Israel will be saved. All Israel will be saved.
A lot of people won't like the idea of that, I can assure you. I'll read one more and then we'll go on to the next piece, yes? Yep. Susan says, our own David Cameron is also pushing for a Palestinian state, which is shocking. Many world leaders who have had an education most of us could only dream of seem to be quite frankly hapless and lack even the most basic common sense. It is a deliberate mindset to ignore the history of Israel, or is oil and big business more important than Jewish lives? Our country will come under judgment if we don't change our tune. Okay, thanks very much.
Yeah. Well, I'm just again looking at just a little bit more of the scripture in Romans chapter 11. It just said, and thinking of the David Camerons of this world, for if God did not spare the natural branches, that's the Jews, okay, he refers this to like a tree, fig tree, and that they are the original branches, the Jews, okay? And we are the ones that are grafted in. He said, but if God did not spare you either, if you don't recognize where you are. But it says, behold then the kindness and severity of God to those who fell, severity. But to you, God's kindness, if you continue in his kindness, otherwise you will be cut off too. So the David Camerons and those who think they know better than God, in their, if you like, ignorance, but also in their arrogance, they are missing God's purpose for the Jews. And you need to be warned that you will be pulverized, as it says, in the prophets that have been fulfilled, I think, almost in front of our eyes. For I do not want you, brethren, to be uninformed of this mystery, so that you will not be wise in your own estimation, Mr. Cameron. Sorry, I didn't say that in there in the scripture, that a partial hardening has happened to Israel until the fullness of the Gentiles come in. That's the secret, sacred secret, that God has not rejected his Jews, but it's the purpose that we as Gentiles, unbelievers, can still come in and be accepted to God, because the end of this particular world system is soon to collapse, as I think anybody with half an eye can see. But what we're going to do now is go to the last segment of the UN, where Gilad is talking to the UN, but he puts things into place about why is it that the UN Assembly has not dealt with so many other issues concerning other parts of the world that are at war with each other and have never come before the Assembly. All they do is hammer Israel. Watch this.
But if a lion landed on Earth, it would be certain that outside of Gaza, the rest of the world is a utopia. A war is currently raging in Sudan, where tens of thousands have been killed and millions are on the brink of starvation. How many General Assembly sessions have been held on Sudan? Do you know? 0. What about the war in Myanmar? 50,000 have been killed and the war rages into its 4th year. How many times has the General Assembly met and how many resolutions been passed? How about Yemen, where the Houthis dragged the country to disaster? Hundreds of thousands are dead and tens of millions are literally starving. All while the Houthis also fire drones and missiles at merchant vessels in the Red Sea. Where is the Assembly's voice about the Houthis and Yemen? Is this not worth an emergency session? Let's continue to Pakistan. Pakistan is in the process of forcefully displacing 1.3 million Afghans back under the Taliban's radical control. Have you convened to condemn this? Oh, and what about Iran? The Ayatollah regime executes thousands of women, protesters, and members of the LGBTQ community, while Iran is hurtling towards nuclear weapons. And mere weeks ago, the regime launched 350 drones and missiles at Israel. Is this not enough for the General Assembly to discuss this murderous regime? But you are not interested in criticizing rogue states. You are interested only in smearing the Jewish state. Do you not see how much of a joke the UN has become? A sick joke that cares nothing for the lives of civilians around the world, that cares nothing for wars being fought, that cares nothing for death, destruction, and suffering. The only thing that the UN cares about is bashing the Jewish state. You don't really care about the Palestinians. You don't care about the Palestinians in Lebanon that are living under a real apartheid regime, or Palestinians in Syria displaced or murdered by the Assad regime. And the UN was silent for all the years that Hamas oppressed Gazans and turned Gaza into the war machine that it is. You only care about the Palestinians when you can blame Israel. Today the UN is a haven for terrorists, for tyrants, for dictators. A laundromat to whitewash their crimes while shifting the focus to the vibrant democracy of Israel. And the root of all the UN's evil is this very room, the General Assembly, with its political makeup. This is the body where human rights abusers have the same voice as law-abiding democracies. And it is in this hall, through distorted politics, that everybody enrolled in the UN system is decided. This is the beating heart of the UN's impotence. It is multilateralism's original sin. Here, the General Assembly, it's only politics and interests that are behind who sits on the Security Council. You chose to have Iran chair a human rights forum. You elect judges from Lebanon and Somalia to the International Court of Justice. You put human rights abusers like Cuba on the Human Rights Council. This is what the UN is. And you all continue playing this charade as if this institution still holds any value whatsoever. This organization burns over $70 billion a year. And what conflicts have the UN resolved? Which human rights violations has it ended? Almost zero. The UN is only escalating wars and human rights violations. You can continue this game of make-believe, but the UN's clock is ticking. I'm telling you, it's ticking, because soon the world will wake up and see the disaster that the UN has become. In the future, remember my words, students will study the fall of the UN. They will learn of this organization's moral bankruptcy and blindness. They will be taught that your indifference and hypocrisy is what brought the UN crashing down. But this is also what will prompt the establishment of a new world institution, a force for good, one with a strong moral compass, democratic values, a body that will refuse to give dictators a free pass and terrorists a lifeline. Mark my words, the UN's days are numbered. Colleagues, on Passover, the Jewish people commemorate our exodus from Egypt. Egypt was a world superpower, yet we were victorious. This has been the story of the Jewish people from that day forward. We all recite this every Passover. והיא שעמדה לאבותינו ולנו, שלא אחד בלבד עמד עלינו לכלותנו, אלא שבכל דור ודור עומדים עלינו לכלותנו, והקדוש ברוך הוא מצילנו מידם. And God's promise is what has stood by our ancestors and us. For it was not only one man that rose up to destroy us, but in every generation people rise up to destroy us, and God saves us from their hands. Remember, many have tried to destroy us, from the most powerful of empires to the most evil of decrees, but all have failed. We are the eternal people, and Israel is here to stay. Thank you, Mr. President.
Powerful, powerful speech, right?
I said I was glad those were his words and not yours coming out. Can you imagine? I wonder how they must have felt sitting there listening to that.
There wasn't
even
many
prophesied
in
that they'd all be gone.
I know. Well, I like that prophecy because the UN days are numbered. It reminds me of Daniel's interpretation of Nebuchadnezzar's writing on the wall. It suddenly appeared, a finger wrote, many, many tekel and parsin, which means you've been found wanting because you've been weighed in the balance and your days are numbered. And the king said to Daniel, when was that going to take place? And he said, tonight.
Yeah.
And the Medes and the Persians under Cyrus came in and destroyed the Babylonian Empire. And that was the end. And what did he do? He sent the Israel people like Daniel and all of those, including the utensils which they'd nicked from the temple 70 years earlier, and actually restored and paid for the Jewish people to go back and rebuild Jerusalem and the walls thereof, and obviously the temple. Just incredible. How could that happen? Who would ever let a captive people go when you could have put them into enslavement? But Cyrus was called of God, unbeknown to himself why, and he did it. But what I'm saying is, I'm with Gilad. The days of the UN are numbered. Many, many tekel and parsin.
Okay, so thank God for you all who speak the truth in love. We have a hope in Jesus, and this world is not our home, and light will overcome the darkness.
Amen.
I agree that Hamas are using the Palestinian people. However, don't forget that Hamas are Palestinian fighters, those who reside in Palestine. I recall the distressing scenes as some of the hostages were transported through the streets of Palestine, and local people, Palestinians, were kicking, punching, spitting, and even defacing the dead bodies. I find it troubling and embarrassing, those protesting within the UK and abroad, their disregard of the facts of the overall situation. God will protect Israel and God's chosen people will be saved. I think a lot of the people who are demonstrating don't have a clue. I think they're quite ignorant.
Well, they are, sadly. They
hear this and that.
If they knew the truth, they wouldn't be doing what they did. Yeah, it's a frenzy, and it's because it's the Jews. It's that same old anti-Semitism which has been inert through the world. We got running out of time, Leslie.
Okay,
reading, please.
Hi, Cram. He says, hi, Howard and Leslie. I cannot understand why this lot is going on. The UN was made to be against this satanic behaviour. Let's pull together and pray for a change that will blow these people out for good. Hi, Howard and Leslie, says Ian. When Syria and Turkey, enemies of Israel, went against Israel, they got earthquakes. When man cursed Israel on TV, he was struck down dead. When the UK made a terrible decision against Israel, they had a storm casting havoc and wiping out Brits. When will people learn their lessons? From Ian in Glasgow.
You can't come against God's people.
Debbie, at the moment, America is holding back all the supplies that Israel needs in the ongoing situation. A senator said to the defence minister, you should as well as the Biden administration should be ashamed. How am I doing?
Keep going. Don't worry, darling. We'll stop you when we have to. Keep going.
I always thought of David Cameron as Pharaoh. Okay. Teresa says the ugly nations are so enthralled in the teaching of Alice Bailey and the New Age witchcraft, they are against anything to do with God. May the Lord bless Israel, the apple of his eye, the people and the land, for the two cannot be separated. Let God arise and his enemies be scattered.
Very good. Keep going.
Pro-Palestinian students have taken over Oxford and Cambridge University. Also, Bradford in Yorkshire is a no-go area for Christians.
God's separating the sheep from the goats, and the goats are going to be the ones that won't go through into God's new world order, as it were. Yeah, keep going.
Okay. Hi, Howard and Leslie. There's a conversation online between an IDF negotiator trying hard to persuade a family and others to leave Rafah before a strike on Hamas takes place. It shows the deceived, deluded mentality of Islam believers. You may want to show it on tomorrow's show, says Andy. Thanks, Andy.
Leslie, we got 50 seconds or 30 seconds.
Do you want to wrap up?
Yeah, I've got to say that can we pick up those emails tomorrow night? We picked those up because we haven't been able to show the Arab and the Jew living together in peace and harmony. We haven't shown the Muslim lady who is very well asking the right sort of questions and wants to follow Jesus, who is a lover of peace and wants to make amends, as it were, and doesn't want to follow the hadith, which is quite the opposite to love and peace and happiness. So what I want to say to you all, thank you very much for being with us tonight. It's not easy, and we do pray that God would actually open our hearts and give us the peace and full understanding of his will and purpose for us all. God bless you.